Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a revolutionary, not a patriot, not even a colonist with a stake in how this war ends. You're a redcoat, a working-class son of Britain, dragged across an ocean to bleed on land that never asked for your presence. You didn't write the king's speeches or vote in Parliament. You just took the shilling, buttoned the coat, and followed orders. And now, here you are, ankle deep in colonial mud, starving in your own sweat-soaked wool, hated by rebels, pitied by loyalists, and forgotten by home. This is not glory. It's not even politics. It's just a long, stupid war, and you're the one carrying the musket. Before we trudge into the fog together, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always nice to see who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these grim history stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You're still in Britain, standing outside a tavern in a village that's already been drained dry by taxes and time. The roofs sag, the streets stink of mud, dung, and whatever passed for breakfast in the houses nearby. The winter was hard. The spring was worse. You haven't had a full stomach since Michaelmas, and today the recruiting party has arrived. The sergeant is easy to spot, broad-shouldered, smug and clean in a way no one else is. His coat gleams, his boots shine, and his voice carries loud, clipped and confident. Behind him are two other men in red, each with a hand on a musket and an eye on the crowd. They've nailed a notice to the tavern wall. His Majesty calls brave men to arms. Good pay, noble cause, free travel. The paper is barely dry and already stained with beer. The words don't matter. The sergeant is doing the real work. He tells you the army needs men of strength and discipline. He says the rebels in America have risen against the crown, and that they'll be crushed by gentlemen. All that's needed is for you to hold the line. He promises a steady wage, food every day, regular clothing, and a sense of purpose. The kind you can't find swinging a pickaxe or begging at the church steps. He says you'll see the world, wear the king's colours, and return a better man, or at least a richer one. You know what this is. You know when you're being sold something, but you also know your boots have holes, your knuckles are raw, and you're 2 weeks behind on rent for a space that barely keeps the rain out. The work's dried up, your uncle's dead. The only future ahead of you is the one someone else invents. And right now, this sergeant's story, as flimsy as it is, sounds better than silence. You step forward. Not boldly, not foolishly, just forward. The sergeant looks you over, measuring muscle more than mind. He asks your name. You give it. He asks your age. You trim off a few years. He asks if you're married. You say no, whether or not it's true. That's the end of the questions. He gestures to a man with a satchel who scratches your name, or your version of it, into a ledger. You mark an X beside it. The ink dries quickly. You are now property. They hand you a bundle, your uniform if you can call it that. The red wool coat is stiff and too warm for the weather, with seams that itch and a cut that assumes your arms are longer than they are. The breeches don't fit. The boots have already seen 2 other wars. The linen shirt is frayed at the collar. You're told to keep it clean. You're not told how. There's no ceremony, no speech. A corporal tosses you a knapsack that smells like mould and tells you to stay put. You do. Other men come forward, some eager, most not. Some look like they know what they're doing. Others look like they've been pushed by hunger more than choice. You nod at each other but don't speak. No one wants to make friends with someone they'll have to bury by autumn. You're moved to a holding house, not a barracks, not really. Just an empty stable with the stalls cleared out and straw scattered across the floor like it's supposed to be welcoming. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with the others, wrapped in wool and unease. At night, the wind finds every hole in the boards. Someone snores. Someone else coughs wetly into their sleeve. You keep your coat on, and your thoughts quiet. Training begins, which is to say, shouting begins. A man with a scar down his face shows you how to stand, turn, and shoulder your musket, which you haven't actually been given yet. The steps are barked, repeated, and corrected with a cane if needed. You learn the importance of formations, of silence, of not thinking too loudly. Discipline is the only thing holding this machine together. You are not asked to understand. You are asked to obey. Meals are served cold and late, bread hard enough to chip a tooth, salted meat that may have started life as something four-legged, but is now mostly sinew and regret. You eat it anyway. You learn to eat quickly. You learn to sleep in your boots. You learn that the officer doesn't care if you're tired, sick, or bleeding, only that you're upright and in line when he counts heads. You write a letter home, if there's anyone to write to, or you try. Words come slower than you expected. You fold the page twice, then 3 times, and hand it to a boy with a satchel, who promises to carry it towards something resembling a post. You never find out if it arrives. After 2 weeks, the sergeant returns with news. You're shipping out. Destination, America. The colonies, the place from the stories. A land of abundance, rebellion, and mosquitoes the size of sparrows. You're told the rebels are few, disorganized, and nearly beaten already. You'll be home by Christmas. That's the official line. The corporal just mutters something about the last company, who said the same. You stand in line, knapsack over your shoulder, coat buttoned to the throat despite the heat. The corporal does a head count, mutters again, and waves you toward the cart waiting at the edge of town. It's loaded with other recruits, some pale, some sweating, some visibly shaking. No one talks. No one needs to. The road to the docks is already worn smooth by the boots of men just like you. You climb aboard. The cart lurches forward. Behind you, the village doesn't wave. Ahead, the sea waits. And you, Redcoat now, start the long ride toward a war you don't understand. The cart comes to a stop at the docks just after dawn. Wheels slick with seawater and rot. The gulls circle low and angry, and the air stinks of fish, wet wood, and too many men press too close together. The ship is already waiting, squat, grey-bellied, and creaking impatiently with the tide. It isn't a warship, it's a transport. Which is to say, a floating box meant to stack as many bodies into it as possible before the wind turns. 1 gangplank, 2 board sailors, and 3 dozen ways to fall sick before you even leave the harbour. You're shoved toward the ramp with the others, your pack digging into your shoulder, boots slipping on the slimy boards. The sergeant shouts something about order and discipline, but it's mostly for show. No one's been disciplined since the last dock fight. You're herded below decks in pairs, past coils of rope, rusted iron, and barrels that don't quite smell like food or drink. The ceiling drops so low you have to stoop. The stairs creak. The hold is worse, it's dark. Too dark. The kind of dark that feels heavy, like it's pressing against your eyes and lungs. The space isn't built for standing or breathing. Hammocks hang in tight rows, barely wide enough for a coffin, and twice as damp. The wood sweats. The smell is immediate. Unwashed men, mildew, and something sickly sweet, like rotting onions. You're assigned a hammock by a sailor who doesn't bother with names. Just numbers. You're now 38. They ration out food on the first day. Salt pork that looks boiled and then unboiled again. Hardtack with live weevils, which you're advised to eat quickly or just ignore. A tin cup of beer so sour, it feels alive in your mouth. You swallow it anyway. Water comes later. When it does, it's tepid, cloudy, and smells faintly of rope. The officer assures you it's safe. The corporal mutters that we'll all find out soon enough. The ship moves with the tide, jerking sideways before lurching forward, like something regretting its own existence. The first wave of sickness comes within hours. Men stagger toward the buckets too late. Some don't make it. The deck slicks over with vomit, piss, and sweat. The hammocks sway above it. The air turns from foul to unbearable. The sea doesn't care. You try to sleep, but the creaking never stops. The boards moan like old bones, and the ropes overhead snap in rhythm with the storm brewing outside. When the rain comes, it comes sideways. Loud. Merciless. The ship rolls hard, sending buckets clattering and men sprawling. You grip the edge of your hammock with fingers gone numb. Someone above you vomits. It drips. You don't scream. You just blink and taste salt and bile. 3 days in, the rats appear. Or rather, you notice them. They were always there, behind crates, beneath planks, nested in corners. Bold little bastards, not afraid of boots or noise. They know the game better than you do. One skitters across your chest at night. Another makes off with a bit of your bread in full view. You swat at them with a boot and miss. The sailor nearby tells you not to bother. They're the only ones guaranteed to survive the crossing. A man dies in the middle of week 2. Dysentery, they think? Or maybe dehydration? No one really checks. The doctor, if you can call him that, takes a quick look, mutters something about bad luck, and orders the body topside. It's stitched in canvas and dropped overboard without a prayer. You hear the splash through the boards. The hammock's re-strung before midday. Nothing stays empty for long. You lose track of time. The days are measured in coughs and missed meals. Your skin itches with sweat and salt. Your clothes stay damp, never quite drying, just shifting from wet to cold to warm and back again. The sores start under your arms and around your waist, where the cloth rubs raw. A few men talk in their sleep. Some cry. One man sings until someone punches him in the throat. You begin to envy the rats. The storms get worse. One nearly splits the foremast. The crew screams in a language you don't fully understand and runs about with ropes and buckets like that's going to stop the ocean. You cling to your hammock and count the seconds between each crash. 9, 7, 5. The wind sneaks down through the seams and howls like it's mocking you. You try to remember what the sergeant said about steady pay and clean clothes, but your ears are full of seawater and your throat tastes like rust. On the calm days, they let you above deck in shifts. Not for rest, just to stop you from dying where they can't see it. The air is sharper up here, but it still reeks of tar and wet rope. You stare out over the water, endless grey, no land, no birds, just the heaving back of the Atlantic, stretching out like it means to drown the world. A few men lean over the rail and lose their lunch. One tries to jump. The officers stop him, but not gently. You stop writing letters, there's no point. If you survive, you'll have stories no one wants to hear. If you die, you won't be missed. You keep your head down and your fingers clean, if you can. The bucket is shared, the space is tight. You stop caring what touches you, as long as it's not another man's vomit. The floor slicks and dries and slicks again. Your stomach cramps from the food, then from the lack of it. The 3rd week brings new visitors. Flies mostly. They like the corners, the spoiled meat, the open sores. One man comes down with something that smells like rot and sounds like drowning. He stops moving on the 4th day. The doctor shrugs. The officers pretend it's not contagious. They're wrong. Within a week, 5 more go the same way. On day 32, or what someone insists is day 32, a sailor shouts from above, "Land!" The word ripples through the hold like sunlight. You stumble up the stairs, legs weak, knees shaking. The first sight of it doesn't look real, just a grey smudge on the horizon. Then rooftops, smoke, docks, Boston, they say, or maybe New York. It hardly matters. All that matters is the ground. You step onto the dock like a man just learning how to walk again. The ground doesn't roll beneath your feet, but your body hasn't caught on. Every muscle is tight, every joint stiff. Your stomach still arguing with gravity. The colonial air hits hard, not just the dryness of it after weeks of salted sea breeze, but the smell. Earth, smoke, sweat, something sharp and bitter you can't quite name. The harbour is busy, but no one looks pleased to see you. The ship's gangplank groans with each boot step, and the crowd watches like they're waiting for an infestation to crawl ashore. The first rock hits someone 2 rows ahead of you. A clack against a helmet, a startled curse, a muttered order to keep walking. Another follows, smaller, faster. Then an apple core. Someone spits. You don't know if it's meant for you or the man behind you, but it lands on your boot just the same. You don't look up. You're not supposed to. Just forward. Eyes ahead, pack steady, fingers twitching near your belt. You expected tension, yes. Rebellion, perhaps. Angry men with pitchforks, wild speeches about liberty, some shouting from a distance. But this isn't organised resistance. This is everyone. Shopkeepers, beggars, children, too small to lift a musket, but still old enough to sneer. You pass a woman on the street, holding a baby in one arm and flipping you off with the other. A toothless man shouts something about tyranny, but you don't catch the rest. The accent is strange, stretched flat by the sea and the heat. You're marched through the town in formation, boots thudding in unison like that's supposed to intimidate anyone. It doesn't. A group of locals follows you for half a mile, tossing insults like they're being paid for each one. One of them has a dead squirrel tied to a stick, swinging it like a banner. You try not to think about what it means. The officer up front doesn't stop. Neither do you. The houses are mostly timber, close together and crooked like they were put up in a hurry and never fixed. Horses wander unattended. Chickens scatter across the road. Smoke curls from chimneys that look one strong wind away from collapsing. But there's life here too. Gardens, clean washing on lines, bread cooling on windowsills. Things that suggest the people here were living just fine until you arrived. Now shutters slam as you pass, and the life recedes behind doors. They told you the colonies were part of the empire, that this was home, in a way, just further off, a little rougher around the edges, but it doesn't feel like home. It feels like trespassing. You're not liberating anyone. You're just here, and they know it, and they hate you for it. You arrive at the edge of town, where the trees thicken and the ground turns from cobbled street to churned earth. The tents have already begun to rise. A temporary camp, they say, just until orders arrive. There are no barracks here, no welcome centre, just canvas, rope, and orders barked in clipped tones by men who haven't slept properly either. You're handed a shovel and told to dig a latrine trench. You do. The soil is loamy, dark and full of roots. It sticks to your boots and clings to your sleeves. It's early autumn and the leaves are just beginning to turn, which makes the trees around the camp stupidly beautiful. Gold orange, deep red. You almost forget for a moment that this is a war. Then a musket fires in the distance and someone shouts, and a horse panics near the edge of the tree line, and the moment is gone. You eat that evening near a fire dug too shallow to hold the heat. The meat is dry and grey. The bread is hard as ever. The beer, if you can call it that, tastes like someone strained it through hay and forgot to remove the hay. You're not allowed into the town proper. The officer says it's for your safety, though the look in his eyes suggests it's more about theirs. Some men grumble about being penned like animals. Others are too tired to care. That night, the wind picks up and whistles through the canvas, like it's trying to whisper something you shouldn't hear. The tent leaks near the back seam. You sleep curled against your pack to avoid the worst of the damp. A dog howls somewhere nearby, or maybe it's a man. You stop trying to tell the difference. Someone 2 tents over starts coughing and doesn't stop for a long time. You think of home, but not fondly, just out of habit. In the morning, the corporal reads a list of chores like it's scripture. Patrol the edge of the woods, check the wagons, reinforce the latrine trench. Someone has to boil the water. Someone else is missing. No one volunteers for either fact. The officer walks through camp with his nose up, coat still somehow clean, offering corrections instead of help. You learn quickly not to ask questions. The answers only make things worse. Trade with the locals is discouraged. They don't want your coin. They want you gone. A few desperate farmers show up under cover of night, willing to sell eggs or tobacco in exchange for salt or musket balls, but they move like ghosts, and the deals are quick. One man trades a small wheel of cheese for a flask of brandy. You never see him again. Rumour says he was hanged for collaboration by his neighbours, or the rebels, or the army. No one knows, no one asks. The camp settles into a rhythm. Shovel, march, clean, repeat, but the tension doesn't fade. You keep your musket close, not because of orders, but because it feels like everyone within shouting distance is waiting for a reason to shoot you. Children linger near the camp perimeter and throw stones when the officers aren't looking. One hits a man in the temple hard enough to draw blood. The corporal tells him to walk it off. You stand guard at the edge of the clearing one evening, watching the sunset bleed over the trees. The land itself is stunning, hills rolling like velvet, skies vast and open, birds you can't name swooping low over the brush. It's not home, but it could have been, maybe, if things had gone differently, if you'd arrived in peace, if they hadn't already made up their minds about what the Redcoat means. But you're not here to wonder. You're here to obey. And tonight, your orders are simple. Stay awake, stay quiet, and be ready. You're on the move before dawn, not into battle. Just forward, away from the coast, away from anything resembling comfort. Deeper into a land that neither wants you nor bothers to make itself navigable. The orders arrive with little ceremony. Pack your kit, shoulder your musket, tighten your belt, and fall into line. The sergeant shouts the rhythm, the corporal double-checks the head count, and then the column begins its slow crawl inland, a string of red wool and bad decisions trudging through a continent that doesn't care. The road isn't a road, it's a suggestion. A rut in the ground barely wide enough for carts, choked with roots and churned to mud by the last company that passed through. You start marching on gravel, then wet dirt, then sludge, then snow, then back to mud again by midday. The boots you were issued in England weren't made for this. The leather is too thin, the soles already worn, and within the first 3 miles the blisters on your heels have opened. You keep walking, your pack cuts into your shoulders, your musket drags on one side, the straps dig into your chest like punishment. The wool coat clings heavy with sweat in the morning, then stiffens with frost in the evening. There's no changing out, no dry pair. You just learn to walk with everything wet, socks, shirt, skin, until your feet begin to go numb, then itch, then throb with every step. You learn quickly not to look at your toes. Someone did. He lost 2 by the next march. The weather turns against you with a kind of theatrical flair. Rain that comes down sideways, sharp and cold, soaking through everything before you've managed to curse it. Snow that falls thick enough to bury the trail behind you. Fog that creeps low to the ground and clings to your boots, like it's trying to whisper secrets. And always, always, the wind, howling in your ears, tugging at your coat, carrying the smell of rot and smoke from somewhere you'll never reach in time. The map, when it appears, is a joke, a smear of ink on parchment, marked with towns that no longer exist and roads that never did. The officers pore over it like priests decoding scripture, then nod solemnly and point in a direction that turns out to be uphill, waterlogged, or both. You march because you're told to, not because anyone knows where this ends. The column snakes through hills and valleys, across rivers swollen with ice melt, through woods so thick you can barely see the sky. You learn to stop asking when you'll arrive. There is no there, just more walking. The horses begin to fail first. Thin, jittery creatures meant for city parades or short errands, now asked to haul cannon wheels through chest-high muck. Their ribs show within days. Their eyes grow wild. When one collapses in a shallow stream, the officer shouts for it to be moved. It doesn't move. The men unhook the cart. The horse is shot. No one speaks about it. The meat is left for the flies. Rations grow stranger the further you go. The salted pork becomes more salt than meat. The hardtack goes from stale to green. One night you boil something the quartermaster insists is broth. though it smells like old socks and tastes worse. You eat it anyway. Hunger peels away dignity. A man tries to chew a length of leather from his own strap. Another claims he can cook moss. You consider it. The mosquitoes arrive somewhere near a marsh that was once, allegedly, a path. They descend in clouds, whining, biting things that don't care about rank or cloth. You slap at your neck and wrists until the skin comes up in welts. One man is allergic. His face swells until he can't see. The medic, a bootmaker pressed into medical service 2 months ago, recommends rest and prayer. Neither helps. Marching songs fade after the first week. Too many sore throats, too little spirit. Conversation becomes grunts and coughs. You don't remember most of the names around you anymore. They all blur together. The tall one, the limping one, the one with the voice that carries. Someone jokes about mutiny. No one laughs. You pass the time counting steps, checking for blisters, thinking of the last hot meal you had, then forgetting it again. You sleep in shifts now. Wherever the officers allow the column to stop, you collapse where you stand. On wet leaves, under trees, beside rocks. If the ground's flat, it's a miracle. If it's dry, it's a lie. You wrap your coat tighter and breathe through the cloth to keep out the frost. Every morning, someone doesn't get up. Exposure, fever, or they just couldn't stand. The corporal says their names like they were always temporary. There are no fires in hostile territory, no light, just the sound of men shifting in the dark, coughing into their sleeves, whispering about home. You don't speak. You don't want to say what's on your mind. That you miss the ship. That the ship made more sense than this. That you'd give anything for flat floorboards and stale beer instead of this crawling, rotting wilderness that sucks the strength out of your bones and still demands more. The terrain grows worse. Not harder, just crueler. There's a stretch of forest where the trees grow so close the branches interlock overhead, casting a gloom even at noon. You trip over roots. You cut through brush with bayonets. Your musket strap splits, and you tie it back together with a shoelace. You stop noticing when you're bleeding. It's easier that way. The column pauses at a clearing just before dusk. The word comes down. You've reached the next camp. Temporary again. Always temporary. The ground is soft and full of insects. The tents are slow to rise, the ropes slack with cold, the poles warped from rain. You're told to dig a trench before eating. You dig. Mosquitoes swarm before the last tent is up. The mud sticks to your boots and weighs them down like anchors. Your fingers are numb. The rations are cold and smell faintly of the sack they came in. You eat anyway. You don't ask where you are. It doesn't matter. You're not here to know. You're here to stand and walk and dig, and eat just enough to do it again tomorrow. No battle comes, just the quiet throb of overused muscles, the itch of new blisters, and the sound of another man vomiting behind a tree. You're just outside the new camp, half a mile down the trail when it happens. There's no declaration, no trumpet, no flags raised in defiance, just the sudden crack of a musket from somewhere ahead. Not the measured rhythm of a volley, but the panicked, crooked bark of someone firing from cover. Then another, then two more. Somewhere to your left, a man screams. You drop to your knees by reflex. Training says form a line, return fire, wait for the order. But there is no line, no order, just chaos in the underbrush. The forest comes alive with movement. Too fast to follow, too quiet to predict. You see flashes of colour between trees, figures darting in and out like ghosts. Then silence, a silence too loud to trust. The corporal shouts for you to hold formation, but the formation never really existed. The men scatter, some pressing against tree trunks, others fumbling with their muskets, trying to find something solid to point at. You manage to prime yours with shaking hands, heart hammering against your ribs, like it's trying to desert early. You aim at nothing, because there's nothing to aim at. They're already gone. The ambush lasts maybe 2 minutes, 3 if you count the shouting, but it stretches, in your memory, into something longer, a pulsing kind of dread that doesn't stop just because the bullets do. When the quiet returns, it's worse. You check the ground around you for blood, yours or someone else's. One man is face down near the trail, legs twitching. Another is sitting upright, blinking, until he reaches for his side and realizes it's no longer part of him. You're not sure if anyone was caught, if any of your shots hit, if any rebels were even there by the time you fired. It feels like fighting smoke. You stand in a daze, musket still warm, eyes searching the tree line like it might apologize, but all you get is the wind. Back at camp, no one knows what to say. The sergeant arrives too late to see anything, and too early to avoid making it worse. He demands a report. The corporal mumbles something about movement in the trees. "How many?" the sergeant barks. "Don't know." "What direction?" "All of them." The sergeant doesn't like the answer, but he doesn't have a better one either. You expected war to be lines and uniforms, flags and drums, two sides meeting on an open field, like a game that someone eventually wins. That's not what this is. These colonials don't march into fire. They shoot, run, hide, and shoot again. They wear homespun, not colours. They fight from barns, from tree cover, from inside houses that looked abandoned until they weren't. They don't hold positions. They don't wait for orders. They just appear. And then they're gone again, like the woods themselves spat them out and swallowed them whole. You hear that same pattern again the next day. Another patrol hit, this time from the rear. They took 3 men, vanished with 2 of them, and left the last one hanging upside down from a tree with a message carved into the bark nearby. "Go home." The letters are jagged and uneven, not elegant, just loud enough to be read from the trail. The officers cut it down before it spreads further, but the words stay in your head longer than the sight did. Marching becomes slower after that, not from caution, but because every shadow looks like a gun barrel, and every squirrel sounds like it's plotting murder. You start walking with your musket ready at all times. Not loaded, because that's a good way to shoot your own foot off on a tree root, but primed, powder in the pan, finger twitching near the trigger. You stop trusting the woods. The woods notice. You're told to escort a wagon through a stretch of road that barely qualifies as passable. The cart groans. The wheel sticks. The mule wants to go anywhere else. You do too. Halfway through, you hear the whine of something in the tree. Not quite a voice, not quite the wind. The driver doesn't say anything, just grips the reins tighter. You hear a snap, a musket shot. The mule falls before it can scream. Another shot hits the driver in the arm. You return fire into the trees, but it's like throwing rocks at fog. They're gone before the echo fades. When you return to camp bloodied and limping, the officer doesn't look up from his paper. "Any damage to the cargo?" he asks. You shake your head. He nods like that matters. The driver gets his wound stitched. The mule gets replaced. You don't get an explanation. The next day, orders come down with less patience. You're not just expected to march, you're expected to retaliate. A farmhouse near the ambush site is marked as suspicious. The lieutenant wants it searched, thoroughly. You march with 10 men, muskets ready, bayonets fixed. The house looks quiet, empty. It isn't. There are 3 men inside, unarmed but not unafraid. One tries to explain that he's a loyalist, that he sells oats to the quartermaster, that his nephew serves with your regiment. The lieutenant doesn't care. He orders the barn burned, says it might be sheltering rebels. The flames rise fast. The man screams. You're ordered to restrain him. You do, because not doing it gets you flogged. The smoke carries for miles. That night, you hear gunfire on the perimeter. Not an attack, just warning shots. A message. You're being watched. Every step, every match you strike, every loaf you steal, or tree you piss on. Someone sees it. Later that week, 2 prisoners are brought in. One in homespun, the other in tatters. The corporal says they were caught spying. Or maybe they were just in the wrong place. It doesn't matter. You're told to guard them while the officers deliberate. The deliberation ends with a rope and a tree. You're told it's justice. It doesn't feel like justice. It feels like paperwork being filed with a noose. You stand there, watching it happen. The rope creaks. The body sways. The lieutenant nods. That'll teach them. Teach them what? Not to be poor? Not to live in a village near a trail you happen to be marching down? You return to your tent, the smell of smoke still in your coat. You don't sleep. Not because you're guilty. Not exactly. Just because everything's gone too quiet again. One morning, you wake to the sound of groaning. Low, wet, constant. It seeps in through the canvas like the morning mist, and at first you think it's the wind again. But then it shifts pitch, cracks with breath, and becomes unmistakably human. Someone nearby is retching. Someone else is whimpering like a kicked dog. Your head aches. Your tongue is dry. The stench hits next, sweet and sharp, like meat gone off in the sun. You push back the flap of your tent and gag. The camp is rotting. It's not metaphor. It's not poetry. The wood is damp. The canvas is mould-speckled. The men are pale and slow-moving, dragging themselves between latrines and fire pits, with blank, hollow eyes. No one is marching. No one is drilling. The war, for the moment, has stopped chasing you, but something else has caught up, slower, quieter, and more thorough. You're told it's dysentery, or camp fever, or bloody flux if the corporal's feeling dramatic, but names don't change anything. Men are dropping, not from musket balls, but from whatever is breeding in the water barrel. The latrines overflow, and no one has the strength to dig new ones. The flies are everywhere, thick enough to brush away like dust. The bread tastes like mildew. The salt pork has turned grey. The beer is mostly rainwater now. You drink it anyway. There's a hospital tent at the far end of camp. 2 canvas flaps straining against the wind, sagging like a dying lung. Inside, it's worse than the battlefield. Cots crammed shoulder to shoulder, straw soaked with sweat and pus, bodies wrapped in their own blankets, because there's no one to wrap them otherwise. The medic does what he can, which isn't much. He boils his tools, mutters prayers under his breath, and moves from patient to patient with hands that tremble only a little now. You don't envy him. You're not sick, not yet, but you feel it in your bones, waiting. Your stomach cramps after every meal. Your skin has taken on a sallow sheen. The itch under your collar hasn't gone away in days. You scratch until you bleed. Lice, the medic says. They're in everyone's coats now. You boil your shirt in a pot over the fire and hear the eggs pop like corn. You don't know if it worked. You still itch. Your boots haven't dried in over a week. The mud seeps in from the seams, clings to your socks, softens the skin until it splits. Trench foot, they call it. The medic saws off a man's toes 2 tents over. No warning, no ceremony. Just steel, shrieking, then silence. The man survives for now. No one asks for a prognosis. You keep your boots laced tight and your silence tighter. You're put on latrine duty one morning. No shovel this time, just a rusted pail and the order to clear the overflow. You hold your breath as long as you can, but the smell crawls into your mouth, your nose, your clothes. You scrub your hands raw with sand and water after, but it doesn't come out. That night, you dream of drowning in it. Morale is a word you haven't heard in weeks. No one talks unless they have to. The officers keep to themselves, their tents better sealed, their food mysteriously fresher. You see one of them spooning warm stew into a ceramic bowl, while 3 men nearby gnaw on hardtack that cracks like bone. You stop watching. It makes it worse. Letters from home, if they come at all, are weeks late and water damaged. One man receives a note written by his sister. She tells him their father died. He reads it 3 times, then tears it in half and stares at the fire. Another man is sent a box of sweets. They're already mouldy. He eats them anyway. You don't expect mail. You don't check anymore. The dead aren't buried with ceremony. There's no priest, no hymns, just a trench, a name spoken aloud, sometimes real, sometimes guessed, and a bit of dirt shoveled in over whatever is left. You're told not to waste blankets. The dead don't need them. You remove the buttons from their coats before they're lowered in. They'll be reused. One morning the man in the tent beside yours doesn't wake up. You knew him only as Fletcher, or maybe it was Thatcher. He had a limp. He snored loudly. He chewed bark to keep his breath sweet. He didn't complain, which meant he was probably worse off than he looked. When you try to rouse him, his skin is cool and waxy. His eyes don't open. You call the corporal, who nods and waves two others over. They lift him out like he's luggage. You follow them to the edge of camp. The trench is shallow, already lined with bodies. Not many words are said. No one has any left. You help lower him in. His coat stays on. There's no time to strip it. The earth is heavy, clumped with rain. You shovel it over his chest and watch it settle into the creases of his uniform, like he was never meant to be clean. That night, the wind changes and the smoke from the cooking fires drifts through camp with a bitter edge. You lie back in your tent and try to sleep, but your stomach won't let you. You wonder if it's the pork again or something worse. You don't get up. You don't want to go near the hospital tent. That place feels like a sentence. Outside, someone coughs until they retch. Then silence. Then another groan. Then a whimper. The night goes on like that. Wet canvas. Distant shovels. No prayers. Morning breaks behind a low bank of cloud, and the order comes down to form up. You stagger from the reeking camp, still tasting last night's rancid pork. Boots soggy, thighs chafed raw, thinking you'd give a month's pay to stay curled in your lice-ridden blanket. Instead, you shoulder your musket, fall into a ragged red line, and watch the officers' horses pick their way through puddles of manure. The air feels thick, unnaturally warm for June, heavy with the promise of thunder or something worse. When the drums begin their flat, relentless cadence, you feel your insides twist. This isn't another patrol, another ambush you'll never see coming. This is a set piece, a hill, an enemy you can point at, even if he's up there, behind a wall of dirt you can't quite see yet. The column lurches forward in stop-and-start fashion, files compressing and stretching as the road narrows. Every step jars your blisters. Every breath catches the sour stink of unwashed wool and spent powder clinging to last week's coats. You glance sideways at the man marching beside you, Hook, or maybe Hooker, who is mouthing a prayer under his breath so softly it sounds like hissing. Ahead the ground rises, a patchwork of rough pasture, half-dug trenches and freshly felled fence rails, hammered into a barricade. The rebels call a redoubt. Somewhere behind it, invisible for now, muskets wait like buried wasps. The order to load echoes down the line. You bite the cartridge, taste black powder, pour, ram, prime. Your hands shake badly enough to spill grains onto your cuffs, but the sergeant is screaming for speed, so you force the ramrod down anyway and hope the ball seats straight. A gust of wind carries the first smell of smoke, not battle smoke, but green wood burning from the rebels' breakfast fires. The scent feels indecently domestic, as though the men you're about to kill have been sipping coffee while you swallowed bile. Drums rattle double time. The line halts. Officers consult pocket watches. Far off, a single cannon booms from one of His Majesty's ships on the Charles. Everyone flinches as the report rolls across the water and crashes against the hillside like surf. More guns join in, pounding the earth, throwing up fountains of soil and splinters. But the rebel position looks maddeningly intact, just a jagged silhouette of dirt and timber bristling with pikes and fresh-cut tree branches. When the artillery pauses, an eerie cheer rises from behind the works, high and ragged like farmhands at a tavern brawl. Then the advance begins. You step off with the rest, shoulder to shoulder, file officers bellowing to keep the dressing. The hill feels steeper than any you've marched lately, the grass slick underfoot. Halfway up, someone to your right trips and rolls backward, tangling another man. The sergeant kicks them both up again, without breaking stride. Your heartbeat drums in your ears, faster than the fife tune skipping along the line, faster than any reason you can name for being here. A sudden ripple of musketry cracks from the rebel wall. You hear the bullets before you see the smoke. Small angry insects whining past your face. One finds flesh somewhere behind you, thudding like a mallet into pork. Another smacks a brass buckle ahead, sending fragments of metal and tooth into the air. The line wavers, closes with a hiss of sergeant's curses, keeps climbing. You can't see the enemy's faces yet. You see only the dirty white puffs along their rampart, each bloom a portal opening onto death. At 30 yards, the order to fire finally reaches you. You raise, sight, squeeze. The musket leaps, kicks your shoulder like a mule, belches flame, and smoke that blinds you to whatever the shot might have hit. Powder stings your eyes. The acrid cloud hides everything for a heartbeat, then thins just enough to reveal the hilltop, still bristling with rifles. You reload by touch, cartridge, bite, pour, ram, while the rebels reload faster, practiced at wasting no motion, no breath, no mercy. A second volley slams into you at 20 yards. This one feels deliberate, measured, a farmer's patience turned surgical. Men drop as if strings were cut, hook or hooker pitches forward, cheek torn away. The corporal behind you spins, half his jaw dangling, words bubbling out as red froth. You step over him because the line keeps moving, and the bayonet point of the man behind is prodding your spine. Somewhere, an officer shrieks for a charge and waves his sword like anger will pull you uphill by the collar. You crest the first lip of dirt and meet a forest of bayonets, poking over a wall of timber. Instinct screams to thrust, but your musket's barrel collides with another, tangling in splintered rails. A rebel's face juts above the parapet, eyes wild, breath fogging the air. His rifle misfires with a clap of sparks and curses. You wrench your weapon free, stab once, feel the point glance off wood, stab again lower, and find soft resistance. The man screams. You don't hear it over the roar exploding left and right as a dozen British muskets discharge at point-blank range. The wall yields in places. Redcoats pour through gaps slick with blood and earth, only to discover a second line 10 yards back. Men in shirt sleeves reloading behind hastily upturned barrels. Another blast at muzzle range tears through the advance. A drummer boy, no older than 14, folds like dropped laundry. A lieutenant, struck through the gut, tries to rally by waving his hat until a second ball punches his chest and drops him in the dust. You fire again without aiming. The barrel sears your palm. You smell burnt flesh, realise it's your own. The rebels fall back step by step, reloading as they go, pulling friends behind, dragging wounded with boot heels. Someone shouts that the hill is taken, but the word taken means nothing when your company is half gone, and the rest are stumbling in circles, deaf from their own guns, gasping through powder-clogged lungs. Another British regiment swings wide to flank, catches a volley full in the face, recoils like water off stone. The order to retreat trickles through the din, passed by hands because mouths can't be heard. You feel it more than you hear it. The collective sag, the backward shuffling, the refusal of your legs to trust the slope you just clawed up. The rebels let you go with parting shots that cut more men from the column. One ball finds your thigh, it burns, then goes numb. You don't fall, you float somehow, borne downhill by momentum, vision narrowing to a tunnel of smoke and spinning sky. At the base of the rise, you collapse in sticky mud, churned by hundreds of boots. The world is a muffled ringing, like hearing through wool. You taste iron, don't know whose. The hillside above flickers with muzzle flashes in the growing dusk, but the shapes are blurs now. You, them, flags, trees, all ghosts behind drifting gunpowder. Someone grabs your collar, drags you a yard, gives up. Your musket is gone. Your bayonet is bent. Your hands tremble as if plucked by wires. Voices eventually reach you, scraped raw, impossible to match with faces. An officer insists the hill is ours. Another replies that the dead don't care who owns the dirt. You stare at a boot, half buried in mud. Still laced, no foot inside. Smoke settles like greasy fog, tasting of charred wood and burnt sugar, where the powder mixed with blood. Victory, they say, costs what it costs. Lying there deafened, dazed, and bleeding into the earth, you cannot tell whether anything today was won at all. The day after the battle, you're ordered to help unload supply wagons near the command tents. Your thigh is still sore and stiff from the graze you took during the retreat, but you're able to limp upright and grip the crates without swaying too much. The officers' encampment is pitched on a small rise, dry and grassy, well away from the rest of you. The wind carries the scent of fresh bread and pipe smoke, while you haul barrel after barrel through mud that reaches your ankles. You are not invited inside. The first crate you open holds wine. Real wine, not the sour beer you're usually given, or the gut-rotting brandy the quartermaster keeps for punishments. This is French, judging by the label. Unbroken bottles packed with straw. The second crate holds cheese that hasn't spoiled. The third, preserved fruit, honey, tins of meat sealed with wax. You almost laugh. You haven't seen a fresh apple in 3 months. Someone hands you a linen-wrapped parcel to carry toward the lieutenant's table, and it leaks slightly at the corners. You glance down. Roast duck still warm. Their tents are lined in clean canvas, double-layered to keep out wind and rain. Wooden poles instead of cut branches. Actual beds with frames. Blankets not crawling with lice. Tables for writing. Chairs with backs. Clean boots in tidy rows by the flaps. One officer lounges on a camp stool reading a book. Another writes by candlelight with a silver-capped pen. They do not look tired. They do not look like they spent the night next to men whose bodies stiffened before dawn. You stand there holding the duck. No one takes it from you. The officer doesn't look up. A servant eventually appears, clean hands, sleeves rolled, and nods that you can leave it there. You're dismissed with a wave, like smoke from a candle. You step back without speaking and return to the wagons. Your boots squelch the entire way. Back at your own tent, if it can still be called that, the pole has split again. You prop it up with a musket and hope it won't collapse in the night. The canvas is soaked from yesterday's rain and sagging under the weight of new drizzle. You peel it back anyway and settle in on the damp ground, trying not to think about duck or cheese or the hiss of wine being poured into a pewter cup. Dinner arrives late, as it always does, a wooden bucket of hardtack biscuits and a stringy stew that smells like old socks and tastes like burnt grass. The meat, such as it is, has been boiled beyond recognition. The bread is damp in the middle and crawling. You crack one biscuit open and find 3 dead maggots and a live one. You flick them off and eat it anyway, because there's nothing else. Your molar cracks halfway through the second bite. You spit the fragment into your hand and tuck it into your pocket for lack of a better place. There's no fire. Too wet, too windy, and the officers have hoarded most of the dry kindling for their own use. You chew your food with your head down, coat pulled tight, rain dripping from your hat brim in steady rhythm. Beside you a man sneezes twice and mutters something bitter about the French wine he unloaded earlier. Another laughs, then starts coughing and doesn't stop for a full minute. No one offers help. No one offers anything. You've stopped trying to compare your life to theirs. The officers don't sleep in the cold. They don't dig trenches. They don't fetch water from rivers that double as latrines. They send others to do it, then mark it in a ledger and call it good service. They walk through camp wearing clean breeches and powdered wigs while you're patching holes in your socks with twine. They call it discipline when you stand still for roll call in the rain. But when they arrive late to inspection, it's called deliberation. You know their names. You're expected to. They don't know yours. They know your number, perhaps, or the shape of your back when you're carrying their baggage. You once saw a colonel ask a private to stop bleeding near his tent flap because it was attracting flies. That man died the next morning, with his boots still on. The colonel wrote a letter of commendation for someone else entirely. You receive your pay late again. When it does come, it's in coin so worn the king's face looks like a smudge. You're told it's because of delays at port, or weather, or bookkeeping. The officers, of course, are paid on time, and more than you'd earn in 6 months goes into their dinner tents every week. You hear stories of captured wine cellars and entire hams roasted over private fires. You see none of it. When a man dies in the enlisted tents, the body is removed within the hour and buried in a shallow grave. When an officer dies, the camp stops. A chaplain is summoned. A tent is draped. The company is called to attention. Words are said. Toasts are raised. You watch it happen once from the edge of the field as you chew on a strip of leather to dull the hunger in your gut. There's a moment just after sunset when the wind lifts the flap of the lieutenant's tent and you catch sight of the table inside. Linen cloth, candles, plates stacked with something that looks like roast pork, a wine bottle half empty, a silver fork. You look down at your hands, stained with powder, mud crusted under your fingernails, and you realise they haven't been clean in months. Your reflection in the puddle by your boots is grey and hollow-eyed. You don't remember what you looked like before the coat. The rain keeps falling, your tent leaks, you pull your greatcoat tighter, ignore the cracked tooth throbbing at the back of your mouth, and finish your maggot-riddled biscuit in silence. The order comes down just after dawn. A foraging party is to be sent to the next village downriver. You and a dozen others are to go with it. No mention is made of how far or who lives there, or whether they've sworn loyalty to the crown or taken up arms against it. That doesn't matter. What matters is that the quartermaster's ledger is running low on flour and salted pork. And someone remembered there were cows pastured near the stone church 3 miles east. So now you're marching again. Bayonet fixed, stomach hollow, boots still damp from the night's rain. You arrive by late morning. It's a farming hamlet, small grey slumped into the side of a hill, like it's trying not to be noticed. 8 or 10 houses, a handful of sheds. The church is shuttered. No smoke from chimneys, no children chasing chickens or women hanging linens, just stillness. The officer leading the party mutters something about how suspicious that is, then tells you to spread out and secure the area. You know what that means. Everyone does. No one says it out loud. You knock on the first door. No answer. You knock harder. Still nothing. You try the latch, find it barred from inside. The sergeant doesn't hesitate, just signals a man with a musket to shoot through the hinges. The door caves. The house is empty. Blankets on the floor. A loaf of bread half wrapped in cloth. An overturned bucket near the hearth. Whoever lived here left in a hurry, or is still hiding somewhere close. You're told to check the cellar. You do. It's empty, except for a sack of potatoes and the smell of dirt. By the third house, discipline starts to fray. Men begin pocketing things. Knives, spoons, shoes. Someone finds a bottle of cider under a bed and drinks half before the officer takes it for inventory. One man grabs a hatchet from a wall rack and tucks it under his coat like it's a prize. You don't stop them. You don't do it yourself either, not yet. But you feel the weight of your musket growing heavier with every door you kick in. The livestock are penned behind the church. 6 scrawny pigs and 1 cow, ribs showing. The cow stares at you like it knows what's coming. The officer says to take it anyway. Meat's meat, he says. A private shoots the animal in the head. It kicks twice before collapsing into the mud. You're told to help drag it toward the cart. You grab a rope and pull. You find a man behind the last house, crouched low in a chicken coop. He's old, maybe 60, beard tangled, hands raised as soon as you shout. He doesn't run, doesn't reach for anything, just stands, trembling, eyes darting from uniform to uniform. The corporal demands to know if he's harbouring rebels. The man says no. He says he's just a farmer. He says his son left weeks ago, and he hasn't heard from him since. The corporal calls it a lie and tells you to bring him forward. You do, because the grip on your shoulder tightens when you hesitate. They make him kneel in the road. You watch from 10 paces back. There is no trial, no evidence, just suspicion and orders, and an officer too hungry for an example. The shot is loud, too loud in the stillness. The man slumps. A child screams from somewhere nearby. You freeze. Then you look around and realise everyone else heard it too. The officer curses and orders a sweep. You move through the bushes behind the houses, bayonet lowered, heart pounding. You don't find the child, you find a woman instead, dead, throat cut, likely hours before you arrived. Her hands are still curled into fists. She's wearing a brooch made of cheap glass and tin, shaped like a rose. It's pinned sideways, as if she struggled while it was still on her chest. The corporal says to leave her. You do. A barn stands behind the largest house. There's no one in it, but it's stocked with hay and old tools, a stack of smoked meat hanging in the rafters. The officer says it might have been a supply depot for the rebels. Might have, he repeats, louder, in case anyone doubts him. Then he gives the order to burn it. Someone lights a torch. The fire catches fast. You stand there, watching the flames rise, smoke curling into the sky, like a question you don't want answered. The heat scorches your face, even from a distance. Embers drift onto the roof of the house next door. The officer doesn't notice, or he does and doesn't care. You hear someone laughing, half drunk from stolen cider, kicking over a wash tub as the chickens scatter. The barn groans as it collapses. The man who was shot in the road is still lying there, blood pooled under his shoulder, flies already gathering. As the flames reflect off the wet cobblestones, his eyes catch the light for a moment. You think they're open. You think he's looking straight at you. But when you step closer, he exhales one last time and goes still. His lips move, just barely. You don't know what he says. Maybe it's a name, maybe it's a curse. Maybe he's just spitting out the last of the dust. You help load the supplies, potatoes, salted pork, a crate of rusted nails someone thought might be useful. No one talks about what just happened. No one writes it down. The officer marks the village as cleared. No mention of the woman, or the child, or the man who bled out on the road because someone needed to send a message. You walk away with your musket slung low and a length of rope chafing your shoulder. You should feel something, anger, shame, something, but mostly you just feel tired, the kind of tired that sinks into your bones and refuses to leave. You know it wasn't right, but you also know what happens when you ask questions. You think about the barn, the way it burned, the way no one looked back, the way the officer hummed while it collapsed. You tell yourself it was just a raid, just orders, just one village. But even as you climb into the wagon and watch the smoke fade behind the trees, you already know the truth. It won't be the last. You meet them 2 days after the raid, a family of loyalists huddled beside the road, near a burned-out mill, waving down the column like shipwreck survivors. A man, a woman, 3 children, and an elderly aunt who hasn't spoken since morning. The father holds a makeshift white flag, fashioned from a petticoat tied to a broom handle. He waves it with one hand and clutches a ledger with the other. Proof, he says, of taxes paid, of loyalty declared, of letters sent to British authorities offering support. His voice shakes as he speaks, more with hope than fear. They've walked for miles, they say, from a nearby settlement overtaken by rebel militia. They were threatened. Their barn was looted. A cousin was tarred and feathered. They have no weapons, no wagon, and no place left to go. What they have is trust, in the crown, in the redcoats, in the uniform you wear. They believe you're here to protect them. The officer in charge gives a tight smile, nods, and says they can follow the column to the next camp. It will be safer there. He doesn't promise anything else. You're assigned to walk beside them. Not because anyone thinks you care, but because someone has to keep them in line. The eldest daughter, maybe 15, wears boots too large for her feet and a shawl damp with morning dew. She stares at you like she expects salvation. You adjust your musket on your shoulder and look away. The march is slow. The family lags behind the column, dragging a broken handcart piled with all they could carry. Blankets, dried corn, a cracked-looking glass. The aunt wheezes with every step, refusing to ride on the cart no matter how many times they ask. The children don't speak much. The youngest girl cries when she sees the bloodstains on your coat. You pretend not to notice. You haven't washed it in weeks. Other soldiers mutter about stragglers, about slowing down the pace, about dead weight. One suggests leaving them behind. Another offers a darker solution. You keep walking. You didn't volunteer to escort refugees. You didn't volunteer for any of this. But the officer insists it's good optics. We protect our friends, he says, loud enough for the family to hear. At the next camp, space is tight. The family's placed outside the main perimeter, near the supply wagons, told to stay low and quiet. They're given a half ration of salted biscuit and a bucket of water, already tinged with algae. There are no tents left to spare. They sleep under a piece of canvas strung between two crates. That night, it rains. No one helps them build a fire. The next morning, rebel scouts are spotted less than 2 miles out. The lieutenant says they'll pass by without trouble, but the men are ordered to pack light and stay alert. No unnecessary burdens, he says. You glance at the family. The father is still trying to clean his boots. The mother is brushing the little girl's hair with a fork. She hums as she works. An hour later, new orders arrive. The column is moving, fast. No time for baggage, no wagons, only essential personnel and gear. The family is not essential. The officer tells them this without blinking. He explains the situation, says they'll be safer here, says a patrol will return for them, says anything but the truth. They beg. The mother cries. The eldest daughter asks you directly, eyes wide, voice cracking. Will you come back? You want to lie, but your throat sticks. You tell her to stay low, keep quiet, and not light a fire after dark. Then you turn and rejoin the column. You don't look back right away. When you do, the family is still standing there in the field, their little canvas shelter flapping in the wind. The father raises his arm again, holding that white scrap of cloth like it still means something. You think of the barn from 2 days ago, the smoke curling upward, the man on the road cursing with his last breath. You think of all the people who thought allegiance guaranteed protection. The march is long and silent. The ground is uneven. Someone twists an ankle. Someone else drops their cartridge box and is told to leave it. You don't speak. None of the men do. Not about them. Not about what will happen. The rebels won't be merciful. They'll find the ledger. They'll tear up the oath. They'll call it collaboration, treason, betrayal. The women will be punished. The men will be worse. The children. Well, you stop thinking at that point. 3 days later, a rider brings word that the rebels swept the area around the old camp. No survivors found. The officer doesn't flinch when he hears it. Unavoidable, he says. Tragic. The quartermaster asks if the supplies were scavenged. That's the extent of the concern. You feel something twist behind your ribs, but it doesn't rise to the surface. There's no room for it anymore. That night, as you sharpen your bayonet near the fire, the corporal makes a joke about loyalty. Says the Americans want freedom until it's inconvenient. Says the loyalists want protection, but won't fight. Says you can't trust anyone in this place. You don't laugh. Not because you disagree, but because the girl's voice still echoes in your ears. Will you come back? You never answered her properly. And now you never will. You tell yourself there was nothing you could have done. You couldn't carry them, couldn't hide them, couldn't fight both rebels and orders. You tell yourself these things because the alternative is admitting that the uniform you wear doesn't protect anyone. Not the enemy, not the innocent, not even you. You lie down on your cloak and stare at the sky. Somewhere behind you, miles away, a flag still flutters above that camp. A makeshift petticoat on a stick. You wonder if it's still standing, if anyone even bothered to take it down. Winter doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, first with a damp chill that never quite leaves your coat, then with the ground freezing overnight, then with the river icing at the edges and the wind beginning to howl through the trees, with a voice colder than anything you've heard in war. The officers knew it was coming, but they didn't move fast enough. The new camp was meant to be temporary. By the time they realised you'd be staying through the season, it was too late to build anything better. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with the others in a tent that wasn't meant for more than 4. There are 6 of you now, crammed like firewood into the corners, each wrapped in whatever scraps of cloth you haven't already burned for kindling. The canvas is patched with whatever could be spared: sailcloth, horse blankets, bits of ruined greatcoats, and it sags under the weight of snow. You hear it crack at night as frost settles into the seams. One man keeps coughing in his sleep. Another stopped speaking 3 days ago. You don't ask why. The first snowstorm hits harder than expected. It buries the latrine trenches, freezes the water barrels, and collapses 2 tents in the southern end of the camp. The men dig them out slowly, hands wrapped in rags, teeth chattering too hard to curse properly. The fires are rationed. The officers say there's not enough wood to go around. The few trees still standing near camp are stripped bare of branches, bark and dignity. One man is caught burning a crate lid marked for ammunition transport. He's flogged. The fire still burns. Food becomes math. You count every crumb, divide every dried pea by the number of mouths in the tent. The hardtack now comes broken, mottled green in places, still eaten without hesitation. Salt pork is issued in smaller and smaller portions, until one day it doesn't arrive at all. The stew becomes more water than meal, then becomes water with flavouring, then just water. You drink it because it's warm. That's all that matters now. One morning you find a man chewing leather, his own bootlace. You don't stop him. You just make a note of which part of the boot still looks edible. Another man boils a rat and shares it among 3 tents. The bones are picked clean within an hour. A rumour spreads that the officers have a separate stock of flour. No one can prove it, but you see candlelight flickering in their tents late at night, and the smells coming from their fires are more than wood smoke. Letters from home stop coming sometime in December. You tell yourself it's the snow. The ship's delayed. The rider's frozen on the trail. You tell yourself that because the other explanation is that no one writes anymore, that they've stopped waiting, that they've already assumed you're dead, and if you aren't, you should be. One man tears open a parcel, only to find nothing inside but a page of old scripture. He laughs until he cries, then sleeps with the page under his coat. The church nearby becomes a hospital, not because anyone planned it that way, but because it was the only structure still standing. They move the pews outside and lay down blankets on the floor. The smell inside is worse than the latrines, sour, sickly, full of rot and resignation. The surgeon works by candlelight, sleeves rolled, apron stained black from too many failed saves. There's no medicine left, no clean bandages, just a saw, a knife, and prayers offered between screams. Frostbite takes fingers, then feet. A man wakes up with one hand black to the wrist. The medic removes it the next morning with a cleaver. No anaesthetic, just 2 men holding him down while he screams himself hoarse. He doesn't survive the week. You help bury him in the snow behind the camp, a shallow mound marked with a bayonet, stabbed into the frozen ground like a headstone no one wants to claim. The dead stop being counted. The officers' roll books fall out of date. Some names fade with frost, others vanish into the forest, either deserters or bodies no one found. A few are found curled under trees, arms around their packs, eyes open and glazed with ice. The camp quiets. Laughter dies first. Then conversation. Then even complaints. The men who used to talk about home, about beer and women and warm baths, now speak only when forced. Most stare at the ground or the fire or nothing at all. Your coat stiffens from dried sweat and snowmelt. You wear it day and night, never removing it, not even to sleep. Your hands stay red, your breath fogs in your beard, and you lose the feeling in 3 toes for almost a week. You don't tell anyone. If they knew, they might report you as unfit. And if that happens, you get sent to the church. You've seen what happens there. You'd rather take your chances with the cold. By February, the firewood is gone. You burn the stocks of broken muskets. You burn splinters from cartwheels. One tent burns its own tent pole and props the canvas up with bayonets. You You trade a spoon for a lump of tallow to melt into soup. You trade a sock for a crust of bread so hard you chip a second tooth on it. When it finally falls out, you keep it, just to remind yourself it was once whole. Spring arrives slowly, first as slush, then as rain, then as something vaguely green pushing up through the mud. The snow melts, revealing things no one wants to see. Bones, coats, teeth, things that didn't get buried fast enough. The paths through camp turn to muck. The tents sag under the damp, then collapse altogether. The sun returns, but it doesn't warm you. Not really. It just shows you how grey everyone has become. When they do a head count in April, half your company is gone. Some dead, some missing, some too far gone to bother naming. You stand in the line with what's left, thinner than you've ever been. Boots held together with twine and prayer, a hole in your coat letting wind cut straight through your ribs. The sergeant reads off names, pauses, skips, mutters. No one corrects him. You're still here. You don't know why, and you don't ask. By the time you reach Yorktown, you already know it's over. No one says it aloud. Not the officers, not the quartermaster, not even the chaplain, who's been giving the same brittle sermon on duty and Providence every Sunday since the spring thaw. But you feel it in your bones. In the way the cannons rumble through the ground at night. In the way the air tastes of ash and powder, even when the wind's blowing out to sea. In the way your company, what's left of it, moves more like a funeral procession than an army. You've been ordered to dig again. Trenches, ramparts, artillery positions, digging into dirt you know won't hold. Digging because that's the only thing left to do. The Americans have closed in from one side, the French from the other. Their guns are bigger, better supplied, better aimed. You hear them day and night, the rhythmic pounding of siege fire that makes your teeth ache and your spine jump with every distant crack. Your own cannon crews fire back in half-hearted bursts, more out of habit than strategy. The barrels overheat, the powder runs thin, nothing changes, rations are cut again. Water has to be boiled to make it tolerable, and even then it tastes like rust. You chew every bite of biscuit carefully now, half out of hunger, half out of fear that you'll crack your last remaining molar. One of the men tries to eat his boots, another starts whispering to his bayonet, like it's an old friend. No one stops him. The lieutenant just avoids eye contact and moves on to the next miserable task. They say General Cornwallis is here, somewhere behind a more solid wall of tents. You've never seen him. You wouldn't recognise him if he stepped on your foot. All you know is that the orders keep coming and the defences keep shrinking. They say reinforcements are coming too, that the fleet will break through, that the French will pull back, that something will happen, anything, before it's too late. But the only ships you see on the horizon fly foreign flags, and they're not here to help. You hear that one of the redoubts has already fallen. French bayonets took it in the night. The survivors say it happened fast, no warning, no chance to regroup. Just a rush of white coats in the dark, muskets flashing, men screaming in every language known to man. The bodies were dumped into a trench by morning. You helped cover it with dirt. The trenches you're digging now fill with water every time it rains, which is often. The mud cakes your boots until they weigh twice what they should. You've stopped trying to keep them clean. You've stopped trying to keep anything clean. You scrape the dried blood from your bayonet with the edge of your spoon and tell yourself it's just rust. No one bothers correcting you. Sleep is a coin toss. If the guns don't wake you, the rats will. If the rats don't, the dreams do. You dream of being trapped, walled in, buried alive, drowning in earth and smoke. Sometimes you wake up shouting. Sometimes you don't wake up at all until the sun cuts through the tent flap, and you remember all at once where you are. And then one morning there's silence. No cannon fire, no shouting, no movement from the enemy lines. The birds have returned, and their songs sound so unnatural you flinch. Yeah, the silence is not peace, it's preparation. Everyone in camp feels it. Something is coming. The next barrage is the worst yet. It begins just before dusk and continues through the night, relentless and deafening. The ground quakes, trees snap. Whole sections of trench collapse. Your ears ring until you can't hear the orders anymore. You follow where others run. You crouch behind whatever hasn't been reduced to splinters. You watch men vanish into bursts of dirt and smoke. At one point, you realise you're praying, not because you believe it'll help, but because you have nothing else to say. By morning, the guns stop again. This time, the silence stays. An officer rides through camp with his mouth tight and his shoulders drawn high. He doesn't speak until he reaches the command post. When he returns, his face is pale. The word spreads quietly, like rot. Cornwallis is preparing to surrender. Some cry, some laugh, most just sit in the mud and stare. It doesn't feel real, not because it's a surprise, but because it took this long. You've been surrendering for months, really. Every lost meal, every step backward, every man buried without a name was another inch of ground given up. The white flag goes up the next morning. You don't see who raises it. You just see it flutter there against the grey sky, limp and hollow, like a rag left too long in the rain. You're ordered to stack your arms in a central field. One by one, muskets are laid down, bayonets detached, cartridge boxes emptied and tossed aside like waste. Your hands shake as you place yours on the pile, not from fear, just fatigue, like your body is finally catching up to something your mind accepted weeks ago. A soldier near you spits on the ground and mutters something about disgrace. You say nothing. There's nothing left to defend. You're told to stand in formation, a final one. Not for battle, just for spectacle. The enemy troops approach, lines neat and polished, boots shining, flags snapping in the breeze. They look like what an army is supposed to be. You feel like a scarecrow, held together by dirt and willpower. As they march past, some stare, most don't. To them, you're not a threat anymore, just a defeated piece of someone else's story. Cornwallis doesn't appear for the formal surrender. He sends someone else in his place, another officer in clean boots with the right accent and a polished sword. The Americans accept it with polite faces and stiff backs. The French cheer. You don't look up. You keep your eyes fixed on the earth, because it's the only thing that's never lied to you. After the surrender, they don't march you home. They march you to a pen. Not a prison, exactly. Just a fenced enclosure beside a half-burned granary, with a few wooden posts strung together by rope and rumour. It's not strong enough to keep you in if you truly wanted to leave. But you don't leave. None of you do. Not at first. You stay because there's nowhere else to go, and because your legs aren't ready to walk without purpose again. You eat what they give you. Stale bread, boiled roots, whatever the guards feel like tossing in. The portions are small, and the guards don't speak. They just stare at your uniform with the look most men give a dog that's outlived its use. There's no word on when you'll be moved, or where. Some say the ships are coming. Others say they've been turned around. One man insists he overheard a guard saying that the Crown has stopped paying for transport. Too expensive. Too pointless now. A few names are called, then nothing. Days pass. The wounded get worse. The fever takes 3 men in your tent before someone finally comes to check. The bodies are removed without ceremony. You don't know where they go. You begin to notice who has family waiting and who doesn't. Those with relatives in the colonies, merchants, loyalist cousins, a brother who married a local girl, sometimes get released early under parole. Not you. You have no one here and no connections to trade. Just your coat, your name, and a vague promise made 3 years ago in a smoky pub about land, honour, and regular wages. You have none of those things now. After a week, one of your tent mates vanishes. No one saw him go. The next day, another man tries the same. He's caught and brought back bleeding, his arm broken in 2 places. The guards don't kill him. They don't need to. The other prisoners handle the rest, quietly, after dark, in a way that doesn't draw attention. By morning, no one speaks of him again. That's how it works now. Eventually, the guards stop coming. The food doesn't arrive. The men posted at the rope lines vanish during the night and aren't replaced. No one says a word, not the officers, Not the sentries, not even the chaplain. For a while you just wait, assuming someone will bark an order or slam a musket against a fence post. But the silence holds. By the next morning, the gate is still open. The watchtower's empty. Someone walks out, then another. No one stops them. No one follows. There's no discharge, no parole, no escort. You're not released. You're simply no longer counted. You drift. Some of the men head north, hoping to find loyalist enclaves near the Canadian border. Others try for the coast, praying there's a ship with enough space and pity to take them home. A few stay in the woods and don't come out. You've heard rumours that deserters are being taken in by farmers, working under false names in exchange for bread and silence. You try a village once, a small one with a mill, and a church and a boy with a wooden sword who throws stones at your boots when you walk past. You sleep in barns when you can, under trees when you can't. The winter left your hands half numb, and the wound in your thigh aches every time the weather shifts. You haven't seen a coin in weeks. Your musket is gone. You carry a knife now, stolen, dulled at the edge, good for little more than carving strips of bark off dry wood, when you can't find anything else to do with your hands. At one point you pass another redcoat, older, limping, eyes red-rimmed from drink or fever. He doesn't speak, just nods. You nod back. That's the extent of your brotherhood now, a shared glance and the understanding that neither of you is going home. Home. That word still stings when it surfaces. You imagine the port where you boarded the ship, the grey water, the fog, the recruiting sergeant's grin. You wonder if he ever made it across himself, or if he simply stayed behind, passing out coats and promises like shovels to a burial detail. You picture your old street, the corner where the baker used to toss stale crusts to the dogs. You wonder if anyone there even remembers your name. One night, you meet a merchant willing to trade you a place on a barge heading north. He doesn't ask for coin, just for the coat. You stare at it for a long time before pulling it off. It feels like peeling off your own skin. The wool is stained, salt-faded, fraying at the seams, but he takes it like it's worth something. You board the boat in silence. The coat stays behind on the dock. You pass through towns where no one knows you. You sleep in doorways, offer to chop wood for scraps, find out the hard way that the war didn't end with surrender. It just changed shape. No one wants redcoats here, not even the ones without coats. Some men lie about who they were. They call themselves sailors, farmers, even Americans. You try once, it doesn't work. Your accent gives you away before you finish your sentence. By the time spring turns to summer, you've stopped asking for directions. You follow rivers, you follow roads, you follow nothing. One morning, you wake up by a creek with your feet in the water and your fingers too stiff to move. You sit there for an hour, watching a fox on the opposite bank sniff at your bag and then trot away. You don't chase it. You don't stand. You just breathe. The cold doesn't bother you anymore. Neither does the silence. You start moving again, not toward anything, just away. From the last camp, from the last fire, from the sound of your own name, which you haven't heard spoken in weeks. You no longer wear a uniform. You no longer carry papers. If anyone asks, you're nobody. A labourer, a man looking for work, a shadow passing through. Some towns turn you away before you speak. Others offer stale bread and a corner of a barn in exchange for hauling timber or cleaning ash from the hearth. You take what you can. You don't speak of the war. You don't speak much at all. You keep walking. There is no repatriation, no pension, no land grant, no triumphant return. Britain forgets you. America never wanted you. You belong to no country now, just the road. And with every mile, the war fades further into silence, like a dream that left too many bruises to be real. You've been walking along a narrow trail, beside a half-dry stream, the kind that winds through the edge of someone else's land. You pause to drink, kneel low, and catch your reflection in the water. Just for a second, it startles you. You look older than you remember. Not just tired, but hollowed out. Like a version of yourself pressed thin from the inside. There's mud dried into your cheek, and a scar near your eyebrow that you got in a skirmish. Your beard's too long, patchy in places, and your teeth hurt when the cold sets in. You splash water on your face and sit back slowly, watching the ripples smooth out until the reflection is gone again. That feels more accurate somehow, less defined, less real. Your coat is still with you. You shouldn't still have it, but you do. The buttons are mismatched now. One lost in the snow near Albany, another torn off by a tree root as you crawled through a ravine. The collar is fraying. The wool has stiffened and gone pale in patches where rain and salt leach the colour. But it's still red mostly, or red enough to be recognised. You keep it bundled when you pass through towns, but sometimes the wind catches the hem and draws eyes. Not angry, not curious, just cold. No one asks where it came from. They know. They just pretend not to. Once it was pride. When they gave it to you fresh pressed and too stiff to move in, it was meant to be a symbol. Authority, order, civilization wrapped in crimson and brass. They said it would set you apart, and it did. People stepped aside in cities, children pointed, some saluted, others ran. Then came the hunger, the raids, the fires, the screams behind barn doors. Then came the looks. Not of fear but loathing. Not because of who you were, but because of what the coat said you represented. They don't hate you. They hate the coat. That's what you told yourself, over and over. They hated the colour, the flag, the orders it stood for, not the body wearing it. But it's hard to separate one from the other when you haven't taken it off in 3 years. When the smell of gunpowder and ash has soaked so deep into the seams that no amount of rain will wash it out. When every time you glance down, you see the same red that someone else saw just before they screamed. You've thought about burning it. You almost did once when the last tent collapsed and the men around you were down to scraps and wool blankets, held together with bayonet stitching. Firewood was gone, and the quartermaster was missing, and the wind howled like something angry and personal. You held the coat in your hands for half an hour, staring at it, weighing the warmth of the flame against what would be lost. In the end, you kept it. You told yourself it might still be useful. Deep down, you weren't sure if it was guilt or cowardice. You've also thought about burying it, not ceremoniously, just in a ditch under rocks and branches, somewhere remote enough that no one would ever find it again. You could dig with your hands, wrap it in oilskin, and walk away without looking back. But then what? What would be left? You've lost your musket, your papers, your rank, if you ever really had one. The coat is the last thing tying you to who you were. Without it, are you still a soldier? Or just a man no one remembers? You carry it slung over your shoulder now. You don't wear it unless you have to. When the rain comes, it's still better than nothing. When the nights turn sharp, it shields your back from the wind. But it's not armour anymore. It's not a uniform. It's just a rag with too many stories stitched into the seams, most of them not worth repeating. You wonder how many others are still carrying theirs. How many are hidden in barns, buried behind fences, tossed into rivers. You wonder if anyone kept theirs clean. Somewhere along the road, a boy asks you if you were in the war. He's maybe 10, barefoot, carrying a stick like it's a musket. His mother calls him back before you can answer. She doesn't look angry, just tired, cautious, like she's seen too many men in too many coats, and doesn't have the energy for one more story. You nod and keep walking. Later that night, you camp near a tree line and spread the coat beside you like a blanket. The stars are out, sharp and clear, and far too many of them. You trace a tear along the sleeve with your finger, remembering the creek ambush, the sound of musket fire bouncing off water and bark, the way the mud soaked up the blood faster than you could move. You don't remember the names of the men who died that day, just the way the coat darkened when it got wet. You sit up slowly, bones creaking, knees stiff, and fold the coat into a square. You set it beside a stone near the fire and watch the edge of the fabric curl in the heat. You could toss it in. You could watch it burn. You think about it for a long time, but the flame dies low and the night grows colder, and in the end, you use it as a pillow instead. Maybe one day you'll leave it behind, maybe not. Maybe it will outlast you, found by someone else, a child playing near a stream, wondering why it was ever worn at all. Maybe it'll be hung in a museum, pressed flat under glass, admired for its colour while its weight is politely forgotten. People will talk about honour, discipline, legacy. They won't mention the lice, the rot, the long marches, the shame, the hunger, the names no one bothered to write down. You lie down, eyes half open, and listen to the wind tug at the trees. Somewhere out there, someone is sewing a new uniform, a new colour, a new promise. Yours is just cloth now, stained, frayed, faded, but still red, still here. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. A man recruited for coin, marched for duty, and erased for convenience. Not a tyrant, not a hero, just another body in a red coat, used up and forgotten. If you'd like early access to more of these slow-burning histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten lives and overlooked tragedies you'd like to see explored. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers Andrew S., Amanda Lampke, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.